Welcome to Agri-Economics and Extension by Anukriti. If you're new to this channel, then this is a channel where I'll be posting lecture videos on agriculture economics and extension. And this particular video is on the topic ordinal and cardinal approach, consumer behavior, law of diminishing marginal utility, law of equi-marginal utility, indifference curve, and income consumption curves. By this, we are starting microeconomics unit. And so without further ado, let's start. First, let's try to understand what is consumer behavior. So, consumer behavior is the study of individuals, group or organizations and all the activities associated with purchase, use and disposal of goods and services. So, consumer behavior is study of human emotions, attitudes and preferences which affects the buying decision of a consumer. So, this is consumer behavior. So why we study consumer behavior? We study consumer behavior to understand the market demand and what will be the market prices, how much good to produce. So this consumer behavior is important to study. So consumer behavior is studied on the basis of two approaches. First, it's cardinal approach of utility and the second one is ordinal approach of utility. So before starting, we should know what is utility. So utility is want satisfying power of a good, or we can say the usefulness a consumer can derive from a good is utility. So let's start with cardinal approach. Now cardinal approach explains utility as a measurable quantity. So according to it, satisfaction is measured in terms of numbers, which is utils. So here it is very important to note that utils was not given any standard unit, like it varied from person to person. There is no standard unit for utils. Okay, so for example, say I am saying that an apple has 30 utils and a mango has 60 utils. So what does it simply means that a mango's satisfying power is double that of apples. So this is what simply utils means. So now let's see that this theory is somewhat impractical. Obviously, it's not possible to give utils to any goods. Okay, so it's somewhat impractical. Now this was introduced by Marshall, and cardinal approach is used to explain the following laws. First, it's law of diminishing marginal utility. Then comes law of equi-marginal utility and also consumer surplus. So this was about cardinal approach. Then comes ordinal approach. So ordinal approach explains that satisfaction level is not measured in terms of numbers. Okay, it is rather ranked. Okay, so we have preference, like this is my first preference, second preference and so on. Like a person will rank pizza first, then burger, then pasta will be last in his preference order. So this is what ordinal approach is about. In this, things are arranged in terms of order. Okay, so this is somewhat practical and sensible because obviously it's easy to rank goods than giving them measure like utils. Okay, now this theory was given by Higgs, and it explains indifference curve analysis, which we'll study later. So first we'll start with cardinal approach, then we'll go to ordinal approach. Now before we start with cardinal approach, let's look at the two terms, that is marginal utility and then total utility. Now marginal utility, its definition is that it is the additional utility derived by an individual by consumption of one more unit of commodity. Okay, now let's take an example. Suppose I say that one apple has 50 utility and two apples have 70 utility. So marginal utility derived from the second one will be 70 minus 50 by 1, that is 20 utils. So this is marginal utility of an apple, second apple. So this is marginal utility. Now comes total utility. So total utility is the sum amount of satisfaction derived from consumption of different units of commodity. So in the above example, it will be 70 utils. Okay, I hope you understand what is marginal utility and what is total utility. It is very important to know what is it, since it will come in your other concepts. Okay, so cardinal approach. The first law that we will study is law of diminishing marginal utility, which is very important, and it is given by H.H. Gosson. So do remember this. Law of diminishing marginal utility was given by H.H. Gosson. So what does the law state? It says that more a commodity that an individual possesses, less is the utility that is derived from it. That is, when a successive unit when with each successive unit of a commodity, lesser and lesser utility is derived from it till the point of satisfaction is reached. And after the point of satiation is reached, any further consumption refers to disutility and the consumer derives a negative satisfaction. So this is what law of diminishing marginal utility is. In simple terms, we can say the more and more we have a thing, the less and less we want it. We can take it from a simple example and it applies almost everywhere. Now, suppose you are eating a samosa. So the first samosa gives you more satisfaction, obviously, than the second one. And it keeps on decreasing. Like when you go to the third and fourth, you will have less satisfaction than the first one. And by the fifth, you will almost be full and you won't derive any satisfaction. And if I give you the sixth one, it will give you negative satisfaction. You might puke. Okay, so this is what law of diminishing marginal utility. So it's a very simple law and very important from examination point of view. Marshall also defined it. He said that the additional benefit a person derives from a given increase of his stock, increase of his stock of anything diminishes with growth of stock he has. So this was his definition. In short, we can say that marginal utility keeps on decreasing with increase in the unit of goods. Okay. Now look at some assumptions of the law. The first assumption is homogeneity, which means that all the goods that are consumed should have identical size, should be identical in size, color, taste, freshness, and maturity. Second one is that the consumption of commodity should be continuous, like there shouldn't be any gap. Like I'm taking an apple today, then I'll take 2-3 days after. So it shouldn't be like that. It should be continuous. And the third one is that the preference, taste, and income of the consumer should remain unchanged. Like the income should not change, the taste of the consumer and the preference shouldn't change. The fourth assumption is also very important. Keep it in mind. Under cardinal approach, the utility of money remains constant irrespective of the quantity purchased. So always remember that the utility of money in cardinal approach remains constant. And the last one is consumer should be normal. Like he shouldn't have any habit related to that good or gambling or a miser. So these are the assumptions. Now let's try to understand it graphically. On the x-axis we have unit of good, on the y-axis we have marginal utility, and the downward sloping line is marginal utility, we can see. Now marginal utility is declining. So this is the first graph, and the second graph we have of total utility. On y-axis we have total utility, and the graph is first increasing, then it reaches a maximum point, and then it starts decreasing. Okay, so here we can see where marginal utility is 0, total utility is maximum. So this is the relationship between them. And remember the graph and observe the graph carefully. Now, some of the conclusions from the graph can be drawn are: first, marginal utility is proportional to the price. So this is a concept, like marginal utility is proportional to price. Like you will say how. So let's take an example. Suppose I have 2 coffees. First is Nescafe, which is of 80 rupees, and another I have a local coffee brand which is 50 rupees. So you buy both of them. Now from which you will derive more satisfaction irrespective of the taste and everything, on which you have spent more money. Obviously you will derive more satisfaction from where you spend more money. So marginal utility is therefore proportional to price. But it should also be remembered that when marginal utility becomes equal to price, then after that, when price will be more than marginal utility, then consumer stops buying any further. Obviously, because the utility is less and price is more, so he will think that it's overpriced. So this is also important. Remember this. Okay. So what we have to remember in this, that marginal utility is proportional to price, and when price is greater than marginal utility, consumer stops buying any further. Now the second point is marginal utility falls throughout as the unit increases, reach to a 0 point and then becomes negative. It is evident in the graph. So we can see that it's decreasing. It's reaching the 0 point, which is called zero utility point, where marginal utility is 0, then it becomes negative. Now total utility, it increases but with a decreasing rate. Remember this. First, total utility is increasing, but it is increasing with decreasing rate and reach a point of maximum satisfaction, as you can see in the graph. Then after point of maximum satisfaction, what is happening? It's falling. Okay, so total utility falls after maximum satisfaction point. Now let's see the relation between total utility and marginal utility. First is when marginal utility is decreasing, then what is happening in total utility? It is increasing but with a decreasing rate. Okay, now the second point, when marginal utility is 0, total utility is maximum. Now when marginal utility becomes negative, total utility is decreasing. So keep these 3 points in mind. Many times they ask question from this point only. Now another thing is that the area under marginal utility curve is equal to total utility. That means that when you will find the area under this marginal utility, the area will be equal to total utility. So these 4 points are important. Now let's see what are the importance of law of diminishing marginal utility. So many economic laws are based on this concept, which are law of demand, elasticity of demand, consumer surplus, and law of substitution are based on law of diminishing marginal utility. Okay, so we are done with law of diminishing marginal utility.